Hello and welcome to Simply Awesome Photography. My name is Chucky and today I'm going to test out the D500 with FX lenses. Now one of the things that I did was I looked at Tony Northrup's video on should you use FX lenses on a DX body, and I looked at the DxO Mark website, and it looks like this thing about the perceptual megapixels makes it sound like an FX lens on a DX body is just slightly degraded. So I wanted to find out for myself whether or not that's true or not. So the best way that I could do this is take a D750 body, and I did not want to crop it. So I used three different lenses for my first test. That was the 50mm 1.8, the 85mm 1.8 Nikons, and the Tamron 70-200, and then I threw in the Sigma 120-300 telephoto for the fourth lens because I wanted to check out all these to see how they worked and compared. So how I did this test was I set up the cameras and I shot with the D500. That is a 24 or 20 megapixel camera, and then I took the D750 and I actually walked it closer to the object to try to get the same field of view. Now I know people will argue this, it's the same field of view, it's just that the sensor is cropped down, but I wanted to get a good look at whether or not this DX camera with the FX lenses was actually going to degrade like the DxO Mark and Tony Northrup suggested. So let's go ahead and dive right in. The first lens that we're going to look at is the 50mm 1.8 lens. It is not the 1.4, but I shot the 50mm 1.8 lens at the local skate park. Of course, there were no skateboarders there, but I wanted to see some of the textures and see how these two different cameras, the FX and the DX, compared to see if the FX lens was actually degraded on the D500. So let's take a look. I have them in Lightroom right now, and I've got these set up to about 2:1. And right now I'm not going to tell you which one is which. I'm just going to scroll around on these two different photos, kind of take a look. Now the background, you're going to notice because I step forward a little bit, they're not going to have the same depth of field even though they were both shot at 50mm, 100 ISO, f8, and then I had to do a little bit of adjustment on the shutter speed. But let's take a look at these two different photos. One of them I stepped up forward a little bit, and one of them I stepped back a little bit. That would be the D500. And then you can look at the different edges right here, and just looking at it, trying to do the whole pixel peep as they say, I look at it and I really can't tell. You look at the little dings and scratches inside the concrete and I cannot tell if there's any noticeable difference. You look at some of these and I can't tell whether or not one of them is sharper than the other. So using the FX lens as far as the 50mm 1.8 lens, I cannot tell the difference. The only thing is I will bring it back to fill. If you want to say that this one right here is the D500 and this one is the D750, I used the same exact lens, I just used a little bit different shutter speed on these. So if we zoom in once again, you cannot tell the difference in the actual sharpness. So I would say that an FX lens on a DX body doesn't really matter because we're looking at the edges of the pole, the edges of the sky, and I cannot tell the difference. There isn't any noticeable grain, more on one than the other, and then the actual clarity is just about the same. As I am scrolling across this right there, looking at the edges, there really isn't any appreciable difference even on the corners. Now, like I said, the depth of field is a little bit different on both of these, so you can't necessarily compare one being a little bit more depth of field than the other one. So that's the 50mm, so let's jump on into the next lens. Looking at the next lens, which is the 85 f1.8, I shot these at f8, ISO 100 with the 85mm prime Nikon lenses. There was a little bit difference in the shutter speed. I'm not exactly sure what to attribute that from. Maybe it was me actually moving closer to the statues. But if you look at these and look at the actual detail on the different statues, once again, I do not see any kind of noticeable or appreciable difference between the two. One, of course, is a little bit darker. That is because I did not choose the correct shutter speed to make them both look exactly the same. But right now, I'm just looking at the sharpness. Now, you might be saying to yourself, well, that's f8. And f8, everything is going to look good because that is the sweet spot, and you would be correct. But I just wanted to see if the DxO mark scores and what Tony Northrup was saying about the FX lenses on a DX body, if that would make a difference on my D500. And so far, I cannot tell the difference between the two. I enjoy both pictures. I like the 750 and the 500, and I would use either one of them. Of course, I would use the D500 for sports and probably use the D750 for more of the landscape photos. So let's jump on to the 1.8. I shot these at 1.8, so let me put this on pause and grab the f1.8 shots to show you. Let's now take a look at the 85mm at f1.8, and as you can see, once again, both of these are pretty sharp. It is only 1.8. I was focusing more on this plane right here, and as you can see, it's a little bit sharper, and then as I go up the actual statue, some parts of it, because of the very shallow depth of field, is a little bit out of focus, or it's a little bit blurred. But if you look at it, we're zoomed in at 200% right now, and once again, I cannot tell the difference between the two. It just seems like the FX lens does not matter if it is on a DX body. I am getting the exact same sharpness on both of these, and I would use either one of them. Now let's go ahead and jump onto my next lens, and that would be the 120-300 Sigma lens. So let me put this on pause and then bring it back once again. Jumping on over to the Sigma 120-300, this was shot at ISO 50 on both cameras, 120mm at f2.8. And if we zoom back into the 200%, once again, we see that both of these are extremely sharp, and I cannot give it one or the other. Sometimes I think in my mind that the D750 on the left-hand side might be just a slight bit better, but then when I look over at some of the other textures, I would actually give it to the D500. And so because of that, I really can't tell which one is more sharp and which one is less sharp. Both of them, like I said, one is a 24 megapixel camera. I actually walked forward some on that, and then the other one is a 20 megapixel camera, and I'm using the same exact lens with the same settings on each one of the lenses. Now I did change the shutter speed on them because one sensor compared to the other one seemed to have a different exposure setting in my camera. But as we look at these, if we want to go over to the corners, I'm looking at these. Of course, there's a different depth of field, but the corners stay sharp all the way through, and I don't notice that there really is anything that's really noticeably different. One thing that I can say, because of the shallower depth of field on the one, because I was actually moving a little bit closer, you cannot accurately judge these. And of course, this is not a scientific test. It's just myself doing a test outside to see if I need to buy DX lenses for my DX camera, or if the FX lenses will yield some sharp results. And so far, I'm noticing that the DX body with the FX lenses are definitely producing some really sharp results, and I'm really happy with all of them that I'm looking at right now. So let's take a look at the last lens that I checked out, and that was the Tamron 70-200. Let me put this on pause and jump over to those photos. Last but not least, we have the Tamron 200 or 70 to 200, which I have set on 200, ISO 100, and f5.6. And as you can see, for some reason, this one was a little bit out of focus, but the D500 definitely seems to keep up with the D750 when it comes to sharpness. So I'm not exactly sure what DxO Mark or any of the other people who say that the FX lens on a DX body will yield fewer perceptual megapixels, or that it won't be quite as sharp as a DX. For right now, I'm going to stick with my FX lenses on my DX D500 body, and I will be happy with that. I'm going to be testing some of the more wide-angle ones. I do have a fisheye, I have a 24 to 35 that I'll be testing out, as well as the 60mm micro Nikkor. So stay tuned for those videos. This is Chucky from Simply Awesome Photography, and I will catch you later.